zijn hier bij Stanley Meyer, nu buiten zijn garage. En we hebben net zijn water-powered auto naar buiten gereden, waar er nu wat over gediscussieerd wordt. En er zijn dingen aan gewijzigd en zo, dus hij kan op het moment niet lopen, maar we mogen hem dus wel helemaal bekijken.
Just explaining how this thing
Go ahead.
does.
Yeah, can you zoom in back in here? Are we on?
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, now this is the hydrogen computer system, which was designed in order to be able to process the fuel, to produce the hydrogen gas from water and do it economically and be able to control its firing, go in the engine to allow the Volkswagen engine to run off of hydrogen. There's a lot engineering design that went into this, even though that this is our systems engineering approach. The hydrogen computer system you see here will be miniaturized down to several IC chips, which will allow us to give the economics to apply to a conventional car. Over here, there's very unique design features that had to be developed in order to develop the water fuel cell as a retrofit energy systems to conventional cars. We had to go ahead and develop the laser, what we call the laser distributor, as you see right here, which is put between the conventional rotor cap and that of the rotor assembly. And primarily what this does, this sets up the electronic signals that goes back and triggers the computer system in order to allow the car to run successfully on hydrogen. In order to run this engine off of water, we've also had to learn the ability to adjust the burn rate of hydrogen to co-equal the fossil fuels. We did this by simply now pulling off a portion of the exhaust gas that's coming from the engine, as you see through this tube here, that's going through this electronic regulator that's hooked up to the hydrogen computer. And basically what's happening is that as the ambient air is going into the engine and going through the burning process, it produces the non-combustible gases that retards the speed by which the oxygen atom unites to hydrogen and bring on gas ignition. So by simply using the non-combustible gases coming from the exhaust of the engine, we now modulate and control the speed by which that oxygen unites with the hydrogen, and therefore we are adjusting the burn rate of hydrogen to co-equal that of gasoline or fossil fuels or even diesel fuel. And that gave us the number one retrofit capabilities of retrofitting the water fuel cell technology to an existing engine. And we do this electronically. The unit that you see right here, we call this a gas processor. And basically what we're doing is we're ionizing the ambient air gases that is now going into the process. And this allows us to trigger and use the hydrogen fracturing technology and tapping into a higher energy yield coming from the hydrogen. The unit you see right here, this is referred to as a resonant cavity. Water is now fed into the resonant cavity through this water tank, and as such, we now expose the water to a very high intense pulse voltage field and restrict the amps, and therefore the electrical polarization process now allows us to release the hydrogen economically from water. And by attenuating the voltage field, the amplitude of the voltage field, we now can control the rate of the production of the hydrogen gas on demand. So this is what's referred to as a constant demand generator. We also now extend or allow the voltage amplitude to increase even to a higher level and allow the water atoms to go into an ionization state, which gives us the ability even to produce a higher energy yield by producing more hydrogen gas on demand. So the fuel now coming from the water through the electrical polarization process going into resonance meaning that we're actually tuning into the dielectric properties of water, and it allows us to reduce amps down, flow down to a minimum, and allow voltage to take over that disassociates the water molecule on demand. And those fuel gases are now coming through this electronic injector system as you see here. So basically we're now feeding the ionized air from the gas processor. We're now also taking the water fuel gases that are now coming from ordinary water. We are now mixing it with the non-combustible gases and the ambient gases and regulating those control of the fluid mediums or for fluid mediums. And as a result, now we can tune in and allow this engine to run off of natural water. This system's approach, this particular unit here is referred to as the VIC, or the voltage intensified circuit technology. This is being miniaturized down to a very small, lightweight system. This is demonstrated in our systems engineering approach on the technology that we can apply it to other applications, not only in the transportation area but also in industrial applications. So it was paramount that we would demonstrate and have the technology solved for design engineering, retrofitting to existing energy consuming devices, whether it's being run in an internal combustion engine or a diesel engine or hook it to an industrial process. So all of these design interfacing technology is now being solved. We're in the latter stages of what we call the pre-engineering system, which will now allow us to miniaturize the technology once we're completed on the design applications and take it into mass production. I'll give you a classical example of this. We've also developed from this technology which we call the water fuel cell injector. And basically this injector now is a miniaturized water fuel cell or miniaturized resonant cavity. And this technology now allows us to simply replace, we can bypass this part of the system's approach and now simply replace the spark plug with the water fuel cell injector. And as a result now we can run the water up to the injector, which is now being processed and being exposed to a very high pulse voltage frequency. And as a result, as the water fuel is being going into the system, then the explosion takes place inside the cylinder. Therefore, it makes this an extremely fail-safe, operable system. The cord that you see here is strictly hooks up to a very high intensity voltage pulse, and we restrict the amps to cause the electrical polarization process, which in turn the voltage amplitude now takes it and goes in the ionization state to perform the hydrogen fracturing technology. And then in turn the high pulse voltage frequency now allows the ignition of the gases. So therefore we do this electronically. And so this technology has taken us down to the water fuel cell water fuel injector as you see here today, which gives us a very economical way of simply converting and running a conventional car on natural water. So basically what we do is we feed ordinary natural water in here, non-processed natural water. We now feed the ambient air gases being ionized. It's being mixed with the water. And then we mix the non-combustible gases going in the system that regulates the control that allows us now to release the thermal explosive energy from hydrogen and do it on a controlled means. Further development on the technology, centered around also the development of what we call the laser accelerator control. And this had to be developed in order to translate from a mechanical displacement to an electronic displacement in order to allow the hydrogen computer system to produce the gas on demand based on acceleration control. So what you're really seeing with the water fuel cell as it is today is that we have a full system engineering approach allowing us now to use water as a main fuel source to be able to run a conventional engine and run it on water and do it and equal or supersede the performance of a car running on gasoline and diesel fuel. Many people do not realize that when you run a car or truck on either gasoline or diesel fuel, you're actually running it on hydrogen. And all we're doing is using the hydrogen from water. And under the National Bureau of Standards figures shows that when you use water, the energy release is roughly 2.5 times more powerful than that of gasoline. So water is a very powerful fuel. And all you needed to do was solve the answers of, number one, producing the hydrogen economically, controlling it on demand, being able to adjust the burn rate of hydrogen and gas to co-equal the fossil fuels, and the third one was to be able to transport it without spark ignition. And we've solved all of these problems on the design engineering, and of course the water fuel injector, as I've shown you, now gives us the abilities to transport the water directly to the fuel injector, which is now going into the voltage zones, which now is performing the electrical polarization process that goes and triggers the hydrogen fracturing technology, but it's doing it inside the engine. So we all know that natural water is very stable, and therefore it becomes a very fail-safe operable system, as we pointed out earlier. Yeah, we talked about that. Yeah, yeah. So in a system engineering approach, in mass production, it looks like we can translate and reduce the systems approach down to a unit that costs roughly $1,500 per vehicle. For trucks, it will be slightly larger than that, below $5,000. It looks like we'll be able to reach the economics to it and use an ordinary natural water. You add nothing to the water. You don't process the water in any way. Now here's another feature to the system that everybody asks me about, is what happens to the water in the wintertime? Does it freeze up? Well, part of our technology was in the areas of development what we call a steam resonator. Now, since the unlike atoms take on opposite electrical charges, we simply use another part of our technology to restrict the analog voltage to take over, and therefore we agitate the water molecules, which in turn generates kinetic energy, which in turn heats the water. Now, this is phenomenal in the fact we consume very little electrical energy in order to heat the water. So there are very far-ranging advantages and features to the technology, ranging even in the areas that we now have a way of using voltage and by switching off amplo and dealing with the environmental control areas. We're developing the technology in the areas of desalination of salt water. Whenever you have a free and abundant energy source like water, it's only limited to the imagination to put it to work. This technology is very applicable to desalination of the salt water, handling of toxic waste chemicals by high pulse voltage frequency and restrict the amps. We now can separate the molecular structure of toxic chemicals and render them useless and safe. It also takes us to the technology of combining unlike atoms that heretofore was not possible under the natural state of covalent link-up. This led us to the development of the